Just a few weeks ago, I bought myself a Bambu machine. I was always skeptical about the closed source nature of their hardware, but I also wanted some first-hand experience before I jumped to conclusions. And boy, has that skepticism manifested itself over the last few days. By now you've probably read the news, but in case you didn't, here's what happened. Bambu has announced an update for their machines that will force out any third-party software. All communication with the printer must be handled through the service, which they call Bambu Connect. You no longer have the freedom to choose which software you want to use if you want access to everything the printer can do. Even with the current software version right out of the box, I was surprised how limited you are if you don't want to connect to their cloud service. But let me start on a positive note before I get into the things that really concern me. This thing is really solid and sturdy. I've always had a thing for linear rails, and the ones on this machine are impressive and also heavily preloaded, so the toolhead can't move anywhere. For my first print, I used a small sample of PLA they provided with the machine and didn't pay much attention to it while printing. The filament got tangled up without me noticing, and right away I was really impressed with it detecting the jam and letting me continue right where I was with almost no visible flaw on the object. It's also really fast, and thanks to the load cell, the filament flow is very even. In the past, we needed high accuracy in the filament diameter to get good results, but those modern printers can adjust the flow themselves by measuring the pressure in the nozzle. The stiff motion system also has a bit of a downside, since there is no play in the toolhead, which also means that it can't move if a collision with an object happens, possibly leading to a bent heat break. On the other hand, they're pretty cheap and easy to swap, so there's that. But I'm a bit less impressed by how the machine just flings filament poop all over the place like a crazy ape. Even though I don't use an AMS and it's printing a purge line before printing the object, it still insists on flinging filament at least once every print. It also purges way too much filament in my opinion, even though I haven't changed the filament since the last print. The machine itself is actually pretty silent, especially for the speed it's printing at, but for some reason it insists on running an earthquake simulation right before every print. I'm not sure if this is about the input shaping algorithm. All I know is my other machines only needed to be calibrated once for it to work. The software in the machine itself is overall pretty intuitive and easy to use. The only thing I find mildly annoying is that I can only change the feed rate of the machine to 4 predefined values like 50 or 100% and even a bit faster. They could have easily enabled 5% increments. Overall, the machine tries to be very beginner friendly, which works pretty well. One downside of this is they've eliminated some options completely, like adjusting the Z offset. I first discovered this when my friend Gary asked me why his first layer doesn't work well. He had visible lines on the first layer, even though he was using a textured sheet. The only way to adjust the offset is by changing the G-code in the slicer, so instead of some quick adjustments on the machine, he needed to dabble into uncharted territory to get it fixed. I've never been a fan of outright disabling options for the sake of not overwhelming users. If you never need to fiddle with it, that's totally fine, but in case you do, the option should be there for everyone to change. I've also noticed that Bambu just blatantly removed the option for a color change from their slicer. In Prusa Slicer, which is the base for Bambu Studio, you can set a color change at any layer of the print with just one click. This option is missing in the Bambu Studio and also Orca Slicer. I can only suspect this is an attempt to get more people to buy the AMS. Overall, it's a nice machine though, and for the price of 200 euros that I paid, you get a lot of bang for your buck. It's a bit sad that the print bed can only heat to 80 degrees, and I expect this is an artificial limitation, but it's still fine for me. But let's talk about the main thing that I don't like, and which was actually a bigger obstacle than I imagined beforehand. You are forced to use their cloud for a lot of features. There is a LAN-only mode, which I use, but it only works with Bambu Studio on a full-size computer. You can't use your phone to connect the app. It only works with a cloud connection. Other machines enable you to access a web interface with any browser. Especially the ones running Clipper, like my Vorons, are very impressive in that regard and way more responsive than any app I use to control my printers. I know most of you just use the cloud service and don't worry, but as an experienced software developer, I have to issue some words of caution about all that. No online service is ever 100% secure. Even huge companies like Sony have been hacked in the past. Just recently, Volkswagen had a security breach leaking movement data of 800,000 cars, not only those of private citizens but also government agencies. In the case of credit card numbers and movement data, this is mostly annoying, and at worst you might lose some money. A 3D printer, on the other hand, is quite literally a machine that can burn your house down. A few years ago, such cases only happened because manufacturers omitted safety features on their machines. But with cloud connections, a savvy hacker could override safety protocols of your machine and set thousands of houses on fire at once. Even if the current firmware does prevent thermal runaway, a forced update could wipe those safety features from the printer's code. With the extreme growth of Bambu Labs, it's also probable that the IT infrastructure is a bit messy, but it's just an assumption from my side. Even if you're not paranoid, it doesn't mean you're not being spied on. Even if none of this ever comes to fruition, the recent plans of Bambu have shown a clear direction. By kicking out third-party software, you're getting locked into their ecosystem. If you want to use LAN-only mode, you can't use their cloud service. You have to choose one over the other. They're probably not going to disable the machine remotely, even though they definitely could, but they're making its usage just inconvenient enough that you still want to use their service. I might end up being completely wrong here, but it's not like I'm imagining totally unrealistic events. They wouldn't be the first company to change the terms of service of a physical product you bought later on.
I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
I've been in the market for a wireless camera lately, and even though those have a micro SD slot, you need to pay a subscription to record more than a few seconds of video on the SD card with the camera you already paid for. All this has shown me once again why I'm wary of any hardware that relies on online services to make its features work. You already paid for the hardware, but who doesn't love recurring revenue? It also makes it possible to limit which consumables you can use. You've seen this already happen with 2D printers. Oh, and does anyone remember Juicero? Paid subscriptions are one thing, and the worst case scenario is the company going out of business and shutting down their service, leaving you with an expensive but at least pretty looking paperweight. But don't listen to me, make up your own mind. Ultimately, the choice is up to you, and the only language a company understands is money. If you're fine with what's happening right now, that's also okay. I myself will be sticking to open hardware in the future. It also guarantees that old machines can still be repaired instead of becoming another piece of waste. That's it for today, and I hope you learned something.